Hello everybody, Kemo Sabi here, coming at you with another video. This is off of sciencemag org webpage. I write it by Erik Stokstad, published on June 11th, 2020 at 5:30 p.m. time. With the topic of plastic dust is blowing into U.S. national parks, more than 1,000 tons each year. Remote wilderness areas and national parks in the western United States are getting a dusting of plastic every year, perhaps 1,000 tons or more, according to a new study. Up to 1/4 of the microscopic pieces of plastic, which come from carpets, clothing, and even spray paint, may originate in storms passing over nearby cities, whereas the rest likely comes from further flung locations. The findings, the first to tease apart geographic origins, add to mounting evidence that such microplastic pollution is common worldwide. "We created something that won't go away," says Janice Barthney, a biochemist at Utah State University and lead author on the new paper. It's now circulating around the globe. Brani didn't set out to track plastic pollution. Instead, she wanted to study how wind-blown dust delivers nutrients to ecosystems. So she set up a pilot study with the National Atmospheric Disposition Program to collect such dust at a network of weather stations usually used to sample rainwater across the United States, mostly in remote locations. Looking at samples from 11 remote areas in the western United States, including the Grand Canyon and Joshua Tree National Park, Brahni noticed brightly colored fragments under the microscope. "I realized that I was looking at disposition of plastics, which was really shocking. Brani didn't have funding to study microplastic pollution, so she did the analysis on her own time, spending a very long and stressful year of evenings and weekends counting nearly 15,000 teeny pieces, most of them less than 1/3 the width of a human hair. Brani found a lot of teeny fibers, likely from clothes, carpets, and other textiles. She also found minuscule particles, about 30% of which were brightly colored spheres, smaller than the plastic microbeads that have been used in cosmetics and other personal care products. The spheres are components of paints that might be released to the atmosphere during spray painting," she says. Chelsea Hrachman, an ecologist at the University of Toronto who studies microplastics, calls that finding striking. "The paints are a whole new source that hasn't really been discussed before. The remaining 70% of the particles were harder to classify, so Brani and a colleague turned to a technique called Fourier transformation infrared spectroscopy to analyze those particles in the fibers. It showed that the samples contained on average 4% plastic. That number blew us away," says Brani, who expected less than 1%. After running the numbers, Brani and her colleagues estimated that about 132 pieces of microplastic land on every square meter of wilderness each day. That adds up to more than 1,000 tons of plastic per year across national parks and other protected areas of the western United States, the equivalent of 300 million plastic water bottles, they report today in Science. Other studies have found similar amounts of microplastics in remote locations, including Europe's Pyrenees Mountains and in the Arctic. But the new study has far more detailed data, which helped Brani in her next step, figuring out where the plastic was coming from. To do that, Brani used a weather model to identify the paths of storms for 48 hours before they reached the sampling sites. Storms that had passed over or near large cities carried more microplastic than other storms, she found. The largest amounts were carried in storms that had passed over Denver. These storms deposited 14 times as much microplastic in the Rocky Mountain National Park sample station as storms that came from other directions. The pieces of microplastics were also larger than those that settled out of the air in dry weather, suggesting strong winds of the storms had picked up the heavier pieces. Brani says most of the plastic is likely coming from more distant locations, brought in via high-altitude winds rather than regional rainstorms. About 75% of the plastic was deposited during dry rather than rainy weather. Those pieces tended to be smaller, the size of extremely fine dust, which can travel for thousands of kilometers. In addition, the disposition pattern showed some influence of the jet stream. Higher elevation sites also tended to have more microplastic, further implying that the particles move high in the atmosphere and may circulate globally. Rochman calls this piece of the study the wow part, trying to understand the patterns and processes of how microplastic move around the globe is only just the beginning, she says. Brownie is now working with atmospheric scientists who specialize in dust transport to study such questions as how much particles move through the atmosphere, where they may come from, and how much could be in the air. Much of this microplastic might have been circulating for years if not decades, she says. The particles have first settled in farm fields or deserts or the ocean and then have been picked up again by winds as part of a global plastic cycle. Posted in Environment, and I hope you enjoyed the write-up, everybody. Please leave me with some comments. It'd be great if you'd hit the thumbs up, and thanks a lot. Peace, and roll till the wheels fall off. Bye.